I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 212 of Caropop. If you'd like to throw us some support and help keep this thing going, as Courtney Simeone just did, please go to caropop.com. Thanks, Courtney. I saw this week's guest, bassist-singer-songwriter Victor Krummenacher, perform twice within 3 weeks with two different bands in two different cities last fall. I flew out to Washington, D.C. for the final date of Camper Van Beethoven's perhaps final tour at the 930 Club in late September, and I drove up to Milwaukee's Shank Hall in mid-October during the first Midwestern tour of The Third Mind. That's the largely improvisatory band, also featuring previous Caropop guests, guitarist Dave Alvin and drummer Michael Jerome. Both shows were fantastic, totally worth the trips. Krummenacher has long been one of my favorite bassists. Melodic, inventive, always in the groove and in the moment. I've seen him many times since I first caught Camper Van Beethoven opening for REM at UIC Pavilion in 1986. He's played with the Camper offshoot Monks of Doom, the duo McCabe and Mrs. Miller, the Portland, Oregon-based melodic rock band Eyelids, Camper frontman David Lowery's band Cracker, and as a solo artist. Krummenacher's 12th studio album, Block Out the Sun, came out in digital formats on January 2nd and hits retail outlets on February 20th. He's also been a kindred spirit of mine in the journalism world, a former art director for Wired magazine who still does much graphics and design work and pays attention to what's going on. So he and I always have a lot to talk about. This conversation covers much ground, including the pending release of a new Third Mind EP, Spellbinder, and the state of Dave Alvin's back, the upcoming album collaboration between much of the Third Mind and former Fairport Convention singer and Caropop guest Ian Matthews, the just-announced Record Store Day release coming from Camper Van Beethoven, the possible future of Camper Van Beethoven, and the cinematic feel of Block Out the Sun. How much of Krummenacher's writing reflects what's happening in his own life and the outside world? Are these two things hard to separate at this point? Oh, and in a Caropop episode last year, David Lowery said his song We Hate You quotes something hostile that Krummenacher said to him when Camper Van Beethoven is breaking up. Is this accurate? What's Krummenacher's reaction? I always love listening to him, whether he's playing or sharing his thoughts. Please enjoy this Caropop conversation with Victor Krummenacher. As someone who worked for the Chicago Tribune for a long time, I mean, one of the things you and I have in common is having worked in media, and, you know, as it's gone through its struggles is a good euphemism. But the line that Ben Bradlee is famous for in All the President's Men, the movie, Follow the Money, which editors say all the time, follow the money, is from the screenplay by William Goldman. It's not even in the book.
Sure.
Follow the Money is not even in Woodward and Bernstein's book of All the President's Men. It's a line written by a screenwriter, a brilliant screenwriter, and it's something that we all say now, and it still applies. Follow the money. There's a lot of money right now to follow.
Oh yeah, it's all about money right now. It's all just corruption. You know, I mean, it's just corruption, flat out. There's no, and that's kind of been the problem. I mean, and that's where I get super frustrated with Obama, particularly because of the banking crisis and not doing any trust on the tech dudes in the late 2010s,
right,
or early 2010s. That's the fatal mistake in my view.
Right, and before that, all that media deregulation was under Clinton.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, the Dems have huge culpability, and it's
right.
Media consolidation, deregulation of banking, and then refusal to prosecute the banking crisis and refusal to go antitrust on the tech people before they, because I mean, essentially when you get more money than a country, which is what Elon Musk has and Larry Ellison have, then there's no conclusion you can make other than the fact that if they have more money, they're going to have more power. And,
but they're using it in such constructive ways. You know, that's what's heartening about all of it right now.
Well, they're insane. I mean, that's the other side of that whole issue, because really if you've worked around powerful people, and I assume you have, you know, power is power. And when they want it, they'll do anything for it.
Well, I worked for the Chicago Tribune, which had a real estate guy who bought us, dumbed us down, and made our company bankrupt within a year. And there were, I think, 3 worse owners after him, including the current one. So you really thought that was the low point, but then it just got worse. So yeah, you know, it's like, it would be good to be able to point to some more positive uses of all this.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is I mean, it's interesting with all the Epstein stuff circulating around. I worked with, when I was at Wired, I directed a column for MIT. He did forget what the lab was called, but it was basically kind of their AI, technology lab. And this guy's name was Joy Ito. And when the first Epstein revelations came out, the first ones, like a few years ago, he had to step down from the position at MIT because he had done a bunch of fundraising with Epstein. And that was interesting. But, I mean, like Bill Gates was a guest editor at Wired, and I just remember all, in my tenure at Wired, all the puff pieces that they did about Elon. And that was the thing, because we all thought, and those people presented, as benevolent futurists on a certain level. It hadn't gotten to the dystopian. I mean, I wouldn't say that there wasn't an era of dystopia going on in it, but, it was still being couched in this kind of like technology will solve the problem.
Right. Well, and we thought electric cars were a good thing, right? There was all about like, oh, who killed the electric car? Oh, now they're going to come back. So that's
right. Well, I mean, but that's a whole other kind of chimera on a certain level, because, electric cars actually have larger carbon footprints in many cases than a petroleum-driven car. That's just the fact, because of the rare earth mining. And, you have to look at all the input sourcing and the input energy uses. So. Right.
But again, the person who invented it is backing the guy who's totally for coal and fossil fuels and against, windmills.
Yeah.
Windmills are the problem. So. Yeah, no, I mean,
it is all pretty ridiculous, and ultimately, it's just corruption. I don't see it as anything else. I think it's power and greed and corruption, and and some weird libertarian theory that, government is entirely bad and we must eliminate it because, we know better. And it's such a miscalculation. I can already see it. Minneapolis is a good, I think what they've failed to recognize is that, there are a lot of people who are already really disenfranchised who don't really live within the system. And they're not in the Twitter universe, and they're not really even in the Meta universe unless they're using it as like a means of communication. I have plenty of friends who are out of old activist or minority communities who don't, they just don't interface with that universe anyways.
Right.
And they don't have any money, and they're not really part of like the banking system or whatever. These people they're not going to buy it because they can't. So they'll try and rig whatever they can, however they can, and they've got the power to do it for the time being. But there's going to be a huge population of people who are completely disenfranchised and outside of the systems that you and I live in this country.
And you're hopeful that those people will turn the tide on this stuff.
I don't know if I'm hopeful. I think it's just going to be chaos, because you're going to have, when it comes to eating, they'll want to eat. And at a certain point, they won't be controllable. Other than through sheer violence. And I think that's a real possibility. I don't know Chicago well enough to tell you where to go, but I could tell you where to go in Los Angeles or the Bay Area, where you would see swaths of land that is populated by people who have nothing to do with the dominant system. Like large areas filled with people.
Like specific geographic areas.
Yeah. With like essentially, alternative economies that have a scale to them, and, the other thing that I just blows my mind with these people is, I grew up in Southern California. Where I grew up is not white. In many, many situations when I'm walking around in Southern California, I'm the only white dude most of the time. So I don't know what they're thinking, and as far as the racial thing at all. Because it hasn't been it hasn't been white there ever, really. What happened is that they had people who had money who came in and basically bought out the rancheros and then built citrus farms, and they made a ton of money, and they built it all on the back of Latino labor. And now that is, I would say 65% Latino. And maybe 10% to 20% white. I think it's that low in many places.
Yeah.
So I don't see it. I just don't. The Civil War is underway anyways, but I think the schisms are pretty big, and I think there's a big miscalculation on their part that their kind of white utopia is going to work, which is fine.
Or just a desperation of like they've seen. I mean, there's been this theory for a while that they see the demographics and how they're changing, and this is like sort of a last gasp of trying to turn, have minority rule, like the actual minority people who are the white people who've been around ruling this, big diverse country.
Okay, well, they can have rural Wisconsin and Michigan and Indiana.
No, Wisconsin, it's too close to me. Give them something else. Indiana, they can have. Sorry, Indiana. I probably shouldn't say that. They're another neighboring state. We love it.
But the funny thing
Wisconsin's crazy. I go to northern Wisconsin every summer. I go to like this camp. I go to the North Woods. And you drive by some insane signs in the rural areas. Oh, yeah. And then there's like Milwaukee and Madison that are really cool cities, and there are other like little towns that are wonderful to go through. And it's just, Wisconsin's a weird state, and I hope they keep it together on the good side.
I know. I mean, it's wild just because I've been driving across this country for 40 years now. And, I've watched it change in not great ways. I mean, like Texas is a really good example. It's like, I love Texas. And some of the best people I know on the planet live in Texas. And it's like the controlling political party there has just fixed it in bizarre ways. If you actually look at the maps, the gerrymandered maps, it's ridiculous. And it's certainly got its problems, and there's certainly plenty of unpleasant people there, but it's got a lot of magic to it. And but it's Texas, and I think that's just what's really most interesting to me is that you have this kind of minority coalition with a lot of money and a lot of power is trying to shore it up, but they're trying to shore it up at a time where we've got a huge inequality crisis, and we've got environmental crises, and not just financial divides, but technology divides, huge technology divides. And I think like I said, I think it's a miscalculation that they're going to be able to control it. And then, if you just go with the Chris Hedges war is a force that gives us meeting ethos, that whole theory is basically, once the violence escapes, it's uncontrollable, and it has completely unintended consequences on both sides.
So there's that to look forward to. It's scary. It's a scary time. And they were tear gassing people in front of a school blocks, a few blocks south of my house on my street. Sure. I have a brother, and, I have family in the Twin Cities, and they've been really close to all this stuff. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's wild. And I have a lot of friends in the Twin Cities, and a lot of friends here in Portland who, were born and raised in the Twin Cities. And it's, two guys who worked for Camper for years are, pretty established in the Minneapolis music scene. And it's a nightmare. I mean, it's a nightmare. And it's affecting everyday people. I have a really good friend who he's legal counsel for the Nature Conservancy, and he works with the Minnesota branch. And he's just like, I get on like Zoom meetings with these people, and they're just like gaunt, because it's everywhere. It's had a huge impact.
So you have a new album that came out like a month ago. I mean, just right at, I don't think it's physically out, but it came out at the beginning of January.
Physically released on the 20th.
Of February or
February, yeah.
Okay, and
through MPD or actually Megaforce, sorry.
And you can listen to it on Apple and some other places in the meantime, and which I have. But springing out of what we've been talking about, how much of what you're writing and recording now and the music you're making is sort of springing from what you're encountering in this outside world versus sort of what's going on in your personal life, or how much of all that is inseparable?
Well, so that record's interesting. That recording was started. It's been done for a while. I held it for about a year because I wanted it to come out in the winter, for various reasons. a lot of what happened in the recording Block Out the Sun was I started writing pretty automatically. You know, I've been in a lot of band contexts, and I've worked with a lot of songwriters over the years, and you know, some master songwriters as well. And I had kind of developed prior to the pandemic this means of working, which involved sitting, writing songs, honing away at them, and then going and hiring my band and going in the studio and trying to cut things. When that record was made, I was still doing regular day job work. I had a full-time gig doing design, and I would just take breaks. And, you know, this is where I work. This is my studio, design studio, music studio, everything's in here. And so I would just take breaks and just start fucking around on, you know, I just basically plug a guitar in and start recording stuff. And it just started, that stuff started coming out of me. There were a few things that were happening around me at the time. I had a dog who was 13, I guess, at the time, getting close. I guess he died when he was 15. So yeah, it was about 2 years before. So, you know, I could see his decline, and I was very attached to this animal. So that stuff was percolating through, but I didn't write any lyrics on this record. I just kind of threw out what was in my head, in part from reading that Jeff Tweedy book. I forget which Tweedy book, where he just talks about, you know, I just start singing along with what I'm doing. And I was like, all right, that seems legit. I might as well try that, because I haven't tried it before. You might as well, if you've been doing it for as long as I have, you might as well try to switch things up. And then there was a whole nother side to it, which is that, you know, I'm a fan, obviously, of working with great musicians and playing live. That's really mostly what I prefer to do. And, you know, it's a lot of what, like, The Third Mind is about. You know, Camper, to some degree, was really more a live band than a studio band for a lot of its existence. And this was just a chance for me to get into, like, virtual instruments and virtual strings and start screwing around with synthesizers. It was just an opportunity, and tape loops and all this stuff, you know, in Pro Tools. It's just, you know, I'm an editor for money. You know, I'm basically a graphic designer, video editor. And so it's all just kind of me, the same process of sitting with a computer and taking things apart and putting them back together. Right. So that record was really a chance for me to try and kind of disassemble things. So it was almost recorded backwards, as basically acoustic guitar, then shape the song, no click tracks or anything like that. Then I build a tempo map to it, and then I record Michael Jerome on drums, and then work on some orchestrations, and then ship it off to Bruce Cappan and just go, how badly did I fuck this up? Can you make sense of it? But you know, I know my stuff pretty well. So it was a chance to do some really specific things. You know, the string section stuff. I have a real love of, like, old Scott Walker records and kind of.
Yeah, it's got this really lush feel to it. When you listen to this album, you're sort of seeing these big sweeping landscapes.
Yeah, well, and also there was a lot of, I have reoccurring dreams for decades now that involve landscapes. I don't know what that is, but I just started working with that because that's kind of what my dreaming life is about. So there's a lot of description, like deliberate description of physical landscapes in there. I actually wanted to try and work with a more film-like approach to things. When I first finished the record, I sent it to a friend of mine who I've done a ton of work with over the years. He's like, it's like a Kurosawa movie. It's not really a record, which is fine by me. I just, you know, again, I'm in this odd state of being 60 now and having done this for ages. And you know, probably in the last 5 or 6 years has just been just solidly productive with any number of people. I've been more productive than I kind of even know how to, you know, I don't even know how to control it, you know, that means that, you know, you get to try a lot of different things, from improvised music to, you know, backing up songwriters to just going in the studio and screwing around. It's been a really fertile time. And this record was just, for me, kind of a manifestation of a lot of things I wanted to try.
Yeah, I saw you in the fall with The Third Mind. You guys came to the Midwest, which was great. And I drove up to Milwaukee to see you there. And, you know, The Third Mind is really, I mean, I really enjoy those records that you guys have put out. You put out 3 albums, and then you have a 4th sort of side addendum album coming out.
Yeah, it's an addendum.
You know, a lot of that is built around you guys going in without rehearsing, right? And taking a song and just this and sort of improvising your arrangement and performance, and then, you're doing that live as well. Did that all rub off on what you're doing solo now too?
Yeah, I think it really did, the players on this, and it's Michael Jerome and Willie Aaron, who both work with A Third Mind. It really was a chance, like I said, it was a chance to just try to work kind of as a songwriter, but change the writing style entirely to not just align with, I get really bored. Like I couldn't be in an Americana band. Like I couldn't do Sunvolt or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with Sunvolt, but like I would get really bored real quick musically. Like my musical interests are usually pretty left of center anymore. I don't really listen to rock and roll much anymore. I really much more gravitate towards, like modal jazz or like an Alice Coltrane record or like the Necks. I don't know if you know them, this Australian trio who are just basically improvisatory. But I love songs and I love poetry. So it's really trying to integrate, it's basically trying to morph the tradition of songwriting. That's the way I look at what I've been trying to do in the last couple of years, is just see if you can actually change things structurally and add sonic elements, add things in a way that are influenced by what people are trying to do. I mean, there's a lot of bizarre music in the world right now, which I think is fantastic, and the kids are on to some pretty interesting wavelengths, and I'm so established in what I've known and what I've listened to for so long. I feel like if I don't try and expand things and explore things sonically, I'm kind of, there's no reason to do it, right?
Yeah.
You're just doing the same thing.
Well, and what you're singing about, like, the bookends of this album are Time Will Do Us No Favors. It's first song, Hard Times Have Come to Stay, is the last song. Like, how reflective is that of, these are the times that we're in right now, and this is the stage of life that you're in right now, going through these times?
It is reflective of that. And I think that's the other thing that I wanted to address. It's like I don't really want to, I'm not interested in hiding away from issues of age or issues, I think everybody is in this place. This is part of the reason I held this record. I felt like this record was a certain way of premonition of the times. I've been wary of where we've been going as a society more and more for quite a while. And I think that is in my consciousness at all times. So when I opted to write automatically, that's going to percolate up as a matter of course, because it's the dominant part of my psychology, is sitting and ruminating on the state of things. Right. So that's part of the lyrical content of what I did. But on a broader sense, I also wanted this kind of it's the concept of just like embracing your grief and embracing your sorrow, and just understanding that, loss is the unifying force of humanity in many ways, and that we all go through it. And, the response, I've got a few reviews that are kind of being percolated around, and I'm talking with this one journalist who's written about me a chunk, and she's been pretty affected by this record in an interesting way. And I think there's just, I think there's just an emotional commonality that most sensitive people are feeling right now. And I just wanted to do something to try to embrace that element to it. Yeah. And I'm also wary of, I think that one thing that's happened with playing more improvised music over the last few years is that I've gotten to a point where I'm a little wary to overthink it. I think when you are an experienced musician and your capabilities, and I'm both, like I know what I'm capable of doing musically. I can play most styles of music fairly well. I work with great musicians who can do the same thing. It's always creative when we get together. So you just kind of embrace this trust and don't overthink it. And so that's also part of it. And it makes it interesting to have to kind of retrospectively talk about what you've done, because I don't try and put a lot of conscious thought into it. If that makes, I try and just go with the process, because I think that's where it's the most genuine and the most spontaneous. You're taking the snapshot and then looking back on it, go, what was I thinking when that picture was taken? Exactly. It's just you know, it's the automatic art kind of thesis. And I think that we, you know, this isn't something that Dave Alvin and I have talked about a great deal, especially when we've done interviews about kind of like, well, what is the third mind about? And we were doing this joint interview and we just started talking pretty spontaneously about how controlled music is right now. It's so controlled. And I think that's one of the huge problems with it. And then you can have, you know, if you just take an idiom, take like blues. Dave Alvin, blues guitar player. Joe Bonamassa, blues guitar player. Joe Bonamassa, it's a really calculated image. It's, you know, super hyper competent playing. He's not prone to make, you know, huge fuck ups when he plays. Dave is about the polar opposite on many levels. And there's way more soul in that approach. When you clean things up, it just gets, I don't know, I find it kind of abhorrent, actually. And so everything I'm trying to do these days is really I'm trying to keep things as spontaneous as possible. Yeah, I think Dave was the one in Caropop. I remember having this conversation. I think it was with him. He was fantastic, and was just complaining about there being too much choreography. Yeah, right? There's too much choreography in music right now, and that's not what music is. No, it's not. It should be reflective of It should be reflective of your creativity and kind of, you know. I think it's one of the. You know, we live in a very cynical world, and I think music is a place where you can actually be not cynical. You can be genuine, and have it still work for people. Right. And I think that, you know, that I'm trying to defend a certain level of emotional purity in what I'm trying to do. I mean, that's the whole thing about my entire, like, all of the solo work I've done now for 30 years. And I made a decision. I got signed. You know, when the Monks broke up, I had a demo deal with IRS and went through the whole song and dance process. And they tried to hook me up, you know, like John Napolitano. There's all sorts of weird things that happened in that period, and I just didn't gravitate towards it, and I just kind of walked away. And when, you know, in the late 90s, when Camper started playing again, I started working for Cracker, and I was doing some work for Sparkle Horse. I just realized it's like, I can just do this on my own. And also, you know, I've always had a day job. So for most of my life, I've had enough kind of spare money to just kind of go do what I wanted to do. So I just made a decision. I have been signed as a solo artist at various points in time, but for the most part, I've just made those records on my own as something I wanted to do. In-home studios, you know, for as cheaply as I could, because I just decided that was something I wanted to just divorce from the music business as much as possible. Well, and with this one, it sounds like there's almost sort of an on-demand element to how you're distributing it. Like you're sort of calculating how much, you know, how many vinyl records to press up. It's completely, I mean, well, part of it's, you know, like the music business is, you know, as anemic and horrible as it ever was. You know, going into journalism and music, that was pretty savvy. Yeah, smart, right? Like, good career choices. You and me both. So, you know, I just basically couch what I can usually sell somewhere between 500 and 1,000 copies of a CD over the course of a couple of years, because I go on tour and, you know, inevitably sell a few at every gig. And I have kind of a built-in fan base because of the camper audience who just buys it directly from me. And then I distribute a few hundred through my distributor, and they go to stores, and sometimes they get returned and sometimes they don't. Vinyl's expensive to make. If I make vinyl, even if I do a limited run, I'm going to have a couple hundred copies sitting in the basement, and it just kind of gets, you know, it's like I'm 60. I don't want a bunch of shit sitting around, you know. And it's bigger. I mean, yeah. I've come around to sort of going back to buying a lot of things or most things on vinyl, but there's also something about, you know, if you're recording something in your home studio and, you know, you're not like doing it on analog tape, and, you know, it's like how much
like how much better really is it going to sound on vinyl versus the CD? A CD is a pretty good delivery system of music. It carries a lot of information.
It is. I mean, I think actually CDs, I have to listen to vinyl all the time for work. Like literally, like I have to check test pressings as part of, the process of people I work with and bands that I'm in. And, we're doing a whole Camper reissue series right now, and I'm basically creative control on that. And, I like vinyl. Like if there's something that I really like, I find it and it's on vinyl, I'll find it on vinyl. If there's a record that I played, like if I played it more than like 20 times, I'll find it on vinyl. Like those are the things that I feel like if I'm going to return to it, it's worth having on a hard format. But as a producer of music, you have to kind of decide what works and what doesn't. And I have, I think a lot of us are kind of looking at. I mean, it's interesting just the kind of the tone of this conversation, but I'm not the only artist I know who's kind of going like, well, it could all fall apart tomorrow. I might as well just record this just because, there's a real sensibility among people I'm working with. It's like, we may not be able to do this forever, just, and that's a truth no matter what, but that the door to creativity may be closed by circumstances sooner than we would like. So there's a general feeling, and I've talked about this with several people I work with. There's a general feeling like, well, let's just fucking do it. So it's led, like I said, it's like there's been a lot of studio work from me in the last 5 years, like just a ridiculous amount. There's a lot of things sitting in the can already that, and I'm kind of like, well, maybe we'll get them done, maybe we won't, but at least we documented it for ourselves. And I think the other thing too is that, we live in a unique kind of historical moment where we've gotten really used to this idea of documentation. But, any kind of blues scholar or American music scholar will tell you that, commercial music is a really, it's 1930 more or less, where, recording technology expands to the degree that people start kind of codifying musical performances. I mean, a lot of older recordings are just, finding people who play music and, some lumber baron in Minnesota has got a studio. We're going to throw this guy in here and we're just going to document it. As media codified, music changed. And I think we're at a point where we've been kind of programmed in how we think of and consume music, especially our generation. And, watching technology continue to morph and watching how kids consume music, I try not to get super hung up on it. It just seems like, music's very much a thing that, like music's a live art form in most ways. And whatever documentation you're doing of it is nice, but how long that documentation actually lasts is questionable. And, it's a really unique thing. It's not like painting or visual art. It's a really interesting thing. And it's not like film, it really kind of exists in our heads in many ways. And so, there's just we're at an interesting juncture because I think we are all feeling threatened by impermanence at the moment. And so part of me is just trying to get things done and recorded and distributed out to people for really the most kind of altruistic of reasons, which is like, maybe this will actually make them feel better, and really not operating with much more thought than that. Right.
I think that's something that a lot of creative people have to sort of get through is sometimes you just see some of the stuff happening that's so, you just despair at just like these horrible things happening. I mean, like you just could start from January 1st of this year and just like, it's like one thing after another where people are just throwing up their hands and they're like, what can I do? And a lot of people really are doing stuff, which is great. But I think that sort of being reminded that putting creative work out into the world and feeding people's souls during all of this is like really freaking valuable, and just as valuable as, a lot of other things too. And it's not to downgrade or they're not in competition with one another, but I think that, culturally, a lot of the powers that be are diminishing the value of art and culture, and you could see that in what's going on at the Kennedy Center and it being shuttered, for God's sake.
Yeah,
but it's that much more important to get it out there, right?
I think it is, and I think the other thing about it too is to not get, and I think this is, kind of concluding what I was just saying is, don't get too hung up on the idea of lasting forever, or of creating a legacy, or being like this person that people remember. Do the creativity, because creativity is good. Creativity in its essence is a rebellion against being controlled, right? That's, I think, one of the reasons I've been very attracted to improvisation in music lately, because improvisation, free jazz, there's an ethos there. It's not about control, right? And I think also too, kind of technology as it's weaved its way into music, with the propagation of EDM and things like that. There's a whole, like, I really go down this rabbit hole hard. There's a whole, I forget the percussion artist, he passed away. He's an African-American artist based in Brooklyn. There's a film on him on the Criterion Channel, but basically the thesis in the film, the human heartbeat's not regular in its rhythm, right? And dance music created by computers, it may be able to put you in a trance state, but that beat is not human, right? It's a technologically imposed beat. And I really am looking for things that have soul and flaws in them. And, technology is at this interesting state where I can record. I can make a record in this room that rivals, if I had a great mix engineer working, you could rival any studio that was working in the 60s in my basement. That's where we're at. It's really easy to do. It's kind of ridiculously easy to do these days.
Right.
But it's gotten so easy that we're losing a certain level of humanity in it. So for me, I think the mission is kind of twofold. One is like not getting, I'm not working from an angle of trying to be a big rock star or anything. I'm just working from an angle of somebody who's an artist who wants to reflect on the times, write music that I hope people can relate to and find some solace in, and be human and flawed about it at the same time. Because I think we're kind of sold, like, this is part of, I think, what goes on with fascism, frankly, is like you're sold this kind of utopian vision of society. And I can't buy into that, because I don't believe in utopias. I don't believe, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in God. I don't, I believe that humanity at its best is a coalition of the flawed. That's what it
right.
is.
Of course.
And that art should be a reflection of that.
The best music ever recorded is flawed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the Beatles records all have mistakes in them, and who cares?
Oh yeah, so. No, I think that's why they are still, they're recorded really well for the time, and they last. But it's interesting because this happened to me not that long ago, where we were working on a piece, and I was thinking like, wow, this reminds me of some George Harrison song. I should go and like listen to some stuff. And I was working in the studio, and I put it up on my monitors. I was like, wow, that is just one screwball recording. It's just like so messy on so many levels, and then you read about like the take, and I was like, that's like take 92 or whatever. Like they recorded it 90 times. It's insane.
Right. I think your guy is Milford Graves, your percussionist.
Oh yeah, that's exactly who it is.
So you guys have a Third Mind Spellbinder West Coast tour starting in March. And Dave Alvin posted yesterday that he messed up his back. What's up with that? Is he okay?
We were on the phone yesterday. We didn't talk in great detail about it, but I guess he had a little gardening accident. So he's got some sciatic pain, which means flying is kind of out. So, I worry a little bit about Dave's health sometimes for obvious reasons, but, he's a strong and stubborn person. So, we've been having a lot of fun playing with a Third Mind, and it's hard for us to get it together all the time because of everybody's schedules. So
Seems like you're making it work out more, though. I mean, again, I saw you in
we pushed hard to make it
October, I think it was, and
we did a full tour. We did a full U.S. tour in October. I mean, it's an interesting time out there to be, older people and have this kind of developing band, and the club scene is pretty, like a lot of things, it's affected by what's going on. People are affected economically, and people are definitely not going out very much. And I know a lot of clubs that are on the ropes right now, so it's concerning. But Dave is a live musician more than I am, and there's something. The Third Mind was interesting because when we first started doing it, it was just kind of it was literally just a crazy idea. It was almost like a joke of a conversation we'd had. We manifested it in the studio. There was chemistry there that seemed really comfortable. And then COVID hit and we really couldn't tour it. And then Dave got cancer and then we couldn't tour for a while. We couldn't record. We couldn't do anything. And then when he was well enough to record, called me and said, well, the first thing I want to do is a Third Mind record, that was kind of not on my radar. I was kind of thinking that maybe this was like, it was a nice one-off, and well, we got that done. But he said, no, I want to do it. That's the first thing I want to do. And so right when he had recovered enough to record again, that was the first thing we did in a little funky studio, in a project studio in Los Angeles that was owned by a friend. And the chemistry just kind of came right back. We hadn't seen each other in 2 years. COVID was an interesting thing. It's almost kind of like this weird blip in time looking back on it. David Immergluck and I have been trying to make a record a year since we've known each other, which is 40 years, like work on some project every year. And we didn't see each other for 2 years. And, we walked in and made that second Third Mind record, and the chemistry was pretty potent. And, it took us a while. It was hardly strictly in 2023 when we were finally actually able to get on stage. We've been kind of a band in theory for 3 years, but it took us almost 2.5, 3 years to actually get on stage. And then that first show was like, our first show was in front of 10,000 people at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass, which was a little nerve-wracking.
Wow.
And also, that was a weird time. I had literally put down my dog like 2 weeks before, went down, rehearsed. It was a kind of complete mess. And then, we had 1 day of rehearsal to get it together. And I'm like, we're going to do this in front of 10,000 people. It's going to be interesting. And it worked out really well. And every time we played since, it just has gotten like, there's real genuine chemistry. And how can you go, like Michael Jerome's just a ridiculously musical drummer.
He's fantastic.
And it's a dream to play with them. And then, we use Mark Karen for the live shows because Emmy's obligations with Counting Crows kind of prevent him from being able to tour with us. Mark played with Bob Weir for 15 years. So, improvisation just kind of runs in it. And I think we've really been able to kind of manifest this idea that, people come to me sometimes, it's like, why is Dave doing this? Because I think, talk about somebody who's gotten kind of not by his own hand, but by the hand of other people, and how their perception of Dave Alvin, he's been kind of locked into this. People have this conception of what he does. But if you know Dave, he's got really broad, like he listens to a lot of music. He's got broad tastes. And, if you really analyze what we're doing, we're not really doing anything different than what Dave Alvin does on his own. It's just a little bit more, it's looser. We certainly don't rehearse it. We certainly don't kind of talk about the arrangement. The arrangements happen on the spot. But we're working from a canon. We're working from a canon of 60s, mostly American-based folk and psychedelic rock. Like, that's kind of the canon we chose. Fred Neil and Mike Bloomfield and Nick Gravenites and these things. But we're just taking a different approach because we're different musicians. We're not the
Right.
Guilty Ones or the Blasters, or it's like I'm just from a different school, and so we really get to explore. And part of like this thing that we've got coming out, this Spellbinder EP, one of the first things we talked about doing when we did the first recording, we actually hit an Alice Coltrane tune, but one of the things that we kind of had in our wheelhouse was this Gabor Szabo thing called Spellbinder, which is a great record from like 66 or whatever. And I think Dave was a little like, I haven't really ever played Brazilian music. I think that's maybe a little out of my wheelhouse. He seemed a little uncomfortable. And so, we had recorded the drums, I had Michael record drums for it during COVID to see maybe if we were able to do a remote project, and for various reasons we couldn't do it. So it was sitting there, and, our record label just kind of flew to the idea of doing, another quick follow-up release to Right Now, to the record that we put out in September. I was like, well, we got that sitting around. And we had a couple other things that, one thing that we couldn't put on the vinyl of Right Now just because of time considerations, and just a couple other things sitting around. But when we did Spellbinder, we basically had these pre-recorded drums. We got the rest of the band together. We played against these pre-recorded drums, and we just improvised, as we do. Like, no real direction. And we got a take that everybody felt pretty good about. And then I'd say a day later, I get a call from David. He's like, I have a crazy idea. And I was like, what? And one of the things that Dave often references when we get together is kind of late 60s, early 70s Miles Davis. So, the Jack Johnson record is a big record kind of in our collective psyche. And Dave's like, well, I want to do this Jack Johnson move where I want to take one version that we recorded. He's like, I feel like the instrumental storyline is not complete, and I'd love to take these two versions and crossfade them where the breakdown happens and then just end the song. I'm like, go for it. Dave is not a person that I would anticipate calling me and telling me that. David Emmer Bush, Dave Alvin, not so much. And the fact that he did made me very happy about our time working together, because I think it's given him the freedom to explore things sonically in the way that he wouldn't. And that's the sign to me, again, of a great artist, is the willingness to experiment and also the willingness to fail, right? These are the most important things in the whole wheelhouse. If you can't experiment and you can't fail, you're not going to get anywhere. You might do one thing well and hold it.
He was channeling his inner Teo Macero on that.
Exactly. It's like,
right. We're just going to cut it up this way and do it that way.
Yeah, and that's literally exactly what it was. And, it's a beautiful thing to see. And then, our manager also manages Chad Blake. And so we were able to have Chad mix it. And, that for me is, I'm definitely at like the die happy point. If you can make improvised music and have Chad Blake mix it.
Yeah. He's mixed some fantastic sounding records.
He's a genius.
Kiko right up there, and a bunch of other ones.
Kiko's genius. The Latin Playboys records. I mean, there's just so much work.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's done, and he's still, he works actively. He's been working for Peter Gabriel recently, and did the Last Counting Crows record, and Black Keys, and you just go down a long list. And I'm super hands off with Chad. I just kind of send him the stuff and like give him loose notes, and I'll kind of aggregate comments from the band and send them to him. And I just, he works best when you just kind of let him go. And, from talking with Chad, his whole thing is like, I just kind of improvise at the mixing console. So it's a real, we're in a really kind of nice, privileged place,
He's got a consistent mindset with you guys. When I saw you all in the Third Mind in Milwaukee, I just was struck by, when you're in the audience, you often project onto performers. But I was watching Dave Alvin and watching you and all of you, and I was like, Dave Alvin just looks like he's having just the time of his life. Just being over there on the side, kind of facing sideways. He had his own different lighting from Jesse Sykes, who's the lead singer.
Yeah.
And
he has to see the guitar neck. That's a whole issue right there.
Because she wants it really dark, and he does not.
He does not. Exactly.
And and he just looked like, just kind of being among these fantastic musicians, which you all are, and just getting to cut loose on the guitar, not having to worry about stepping up and singing everything and having all the attention on him. He just looked like he was having a blast.
We have a genuinely good time playing, and that band, it's a real good example of, we can fall apart. We miss a cue or whatever. Like, it's fallen apart a couple times. It usually makes us angry, and then we usually sometimes those are the better shows where we have like some drastic mistake within the first quarter of the show. But we've had a number of shows with that band where I just feel like we've been in a state of grace the entire time. it's been a thrill to kind of walk in as an unknown. There have been some shows specific, like really in Northern California. There have been some really magic ones where we've just completely won over the audience, and I really, the Grateful Dead it's a lovely and storied institution. We all kind of know that there's a lot of turgid, not totally great material in there, and I think being able to work with the ethos of improvisation that the Grateful Dead had, but try and I grew up in the punk rock scene. It's like it's just a little bit more aggressive, and we've been able to manifest something that's been pretty fun that not a lot of people can do, which is to be loose and spontaneous and a quote jam band, even though that phrase kind of churns my stomach,
right? But
do it with an edge.
Do you see this as like your main band now? Like could this be something where, Dave and, you and Michael and everyone are like, you know what, we're just going to like try to get on the sort of album tour cycle and even maybe bring like your own songwriting into it, which is not what the concept of it is. But.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think we'll certainly make another record and we'll just kind of see. I don't know what my main gig right now is. Probably my main gig is just doing all, give you context. In this last 5 years, I've made a record with Charlie Parr, made 2 records with Eyelids. Are
you still with Eyelids, by the way?
I'm still. Eyelids are kind of on hiatus right now, but the band is still essentially together, and we have talked about doing more work.
Saw you guys here at the Hideout, and you've been here a few times with Eyelids.
Yeah. Play bass for the -5. I'm like in -5 team B, depending on like who Scott McCoy feels like calling. I'm working on a record with Ian Matthews from Fairport Convention right now. I've been writing songs with him.
Another Caropop guest.
Yeah, and we're. I don't know if Camper's like permanently on ice or not, but there's still.
I was going to get to that.
There's still a relationship there, and I wouldn't be surprised if the phone rang on that. So. I do sometimes just to make things easier because I do a lot of solo work. I've done a lot of house concerts kind of on my own, and I get a little tired of just driving around by myself. So I've been working with Casey Neal, where we've just been duetting, and that's been fun. For me, it's just kind of I'll just take what comes at my way, right? And then I exist in the world musically, which is why the solo records just keep happening. It's like I'm just creative. I just kind of keep going.
You remade your 2006 album, Cock Crows at Sunrise,
yeah.
A Kiss, and a Lie, and a Curse, and it sounds like it's everyone from the Third Mind but Jesse, and you guys re-recorded the stuff.
Yeah.
So that's waiting to come out too.
Yeah, it's basically done. It's, we spent, it was, that was something I just thought about doing. I was having a conversation with Dave, and he's like, well, we should just do it. And I was like, you want to do it? And he's like, I'm in. So... in typical fashion, we showed up and recorded 6 songs in 2 days, no rehearsals, no whatever, and it came out great. It's just, that I'm in this place now. There's the Third Mind is kind of an extended family because that's who's working on this Ian Matthews record as well. It's like part of what I'm trying to do with the Third Mind, not so much, I don't know if it's like my central thing, but it's like it's a really good collective. And we work well with people. And what I'm trying to do is take this kind of newer musical family of mine. It's ironic because I've known Dave for 40 years and I've known Willie Aaron for about like 35, maybe almost the same amount of time. I've known Emmy for 40 years. But, we really have only been working together in the studio for the last 5 or 6 years. And I think my mindset is like, this is a really good collective. And we all have to do all these other things to kind of keep the money coming in and keep everything working. But it's really nice to get together. So really what I'm trying to explore with the Third Mind is keeping the collective alive. And I think the days of the Wrecking Crew are behind us, but we're a pretty good Wrecking Crew. That's basically we are available. I'll just let people know we're available for hire. It was a funny thing because I did, my friend Pat Thomas, he has another project that it was completely improvised called Mushroom, which has been this kind of weird collective on the West Coast for years. And he's worked primarily as kind of an archival producer, and he's worked with like the estate of Sandy Denny and Ginsberg, and he's done written books about like the Black Panthers. He's just a really interesting and soulful cat, and he's tight with Ian, and he had Ian on the West Coast, and he had me open a show for him, and I brought Emmerbook to play with me, and then Amy wound up playing with Ian, and Willie was there, so big chunk of the third line, and Ian was like, "Who are you guys?" Like, he's like, "I love your songs," and like, these people can just like play anything, and I'm like, well, we're available, and so we just exchanged emails, and the next thing I know, Ian Matthews is sending me lyrics, and it took me a while to get to it because I was really busy last year, but we started writing, and then we managed to get it funded. So
you guys collaborated on the music part of it, or you wrote the music?
Yeah. I've co-written 4 songs for him, which is fun. He's a great lyricist. He just throws me a bunch of lyrics. He's not precious about it. I can just kind of do what I want. And yeah, Willie's written some. So we've got, I
love this cross-pollination, by the way, of like, because I have my whole sort of Fairport Convention fandom, and then Richard Thompson fandom, which is where I first saw Michael Jerome. So then when Michael Jerome was playing with you, I think solo even before Third Mind, I'm like, oh, that's Michael Jerome, that awesome Richard Thompson drummer. Yeah. So it's like, and then Dave Alvin and all the people he's played with. So
yeah, no, we were really. This is the interesting thing about it. In some ways, my career's gotten kind of less coherent. There's like less one central thing that I'm doing. There's all these different things that I'm doing, but in some ways it's just more fun because I get a little less locked in to an identity. And I get, my hardest thing with Camper was I would just get bored, and it's not that I love those guys and I love the music, but the way the band was presenting for a while was, we'd get together once every 6 months and just kind of get locked into playing the same set. And I just got bored, because I just get bored. That's just, Lowery is he's a very disciplined guy, and I don't, when I was younger, I would say, he's an uptight asshole and, just, go on. But, as I've gotten older, I just start to understand people have different ways of working. He has a way that he works that he's comfortable with. I went to go see him do his solo thing over the summer, and it was interesting because, he's singing songs where I definitely get thrown under the bus. And, it's interesting to kind of watch it and watch him do his autobiographical stuff and go, well, it's not kind of how I remember it, but he's a songwriter and he's a storyteller and he's an unreliable narrator and he's doing it. And, and I thought it was really good. I really thought the record was solid, and I thought the show was really good. And it's just, at this point, I'm just happy that people are able to kind of keep doing things.
So David Lowery has a song on that solo record. He had sort of a triple album of basically the 3 CDs that he put out separately. And one of the songs, which I assume you've heard, is called "We Hate You."
Oh yeah, that's
which is about the Camper breakup. Which the chorus is. He told me the chorus is something you said. We really hate your guts, and we will never be your friend again.
And the Not in His Camp reading of that, I won't name names other than Woody Nuss, our old sound guy. There's a memory on some people's part that was what Woody said, but I don't know. I wouldn't put it past me. I'll put it that way.
It's not contradictory to how you felt at the point.
Oh no, when that band went, and I'm fairly responsible for the breakup of that band, and I'll definitely take responsibility for being the ringleader of the revolt. But I was ready for it to go.
But you overcame that and have been playing with them again for 26 years or whatever.
It wasn't, the way that band broke up wasn't great, and I really should have done things better. But the way I look at things now is if Camper hadn't broken up in that period of time, it hadn't happened, there'd be no Third Mind. And there's this whole kind of graduate class of being a musician and making a record with Ian Matthews. I don't think any of that stuff would have happened.
Did you object to that song, by the way, "We Hate You," or did you realize that's fair game?
No, it's all fair game. He's allowed, he's completely allowed to do what he wants to do. I think we're in an interesting place, going into the Camper realm. One of the things I've contemplated doing is getting together with a chunk of the Camper guys, not as Camper, but to kind of third mind that music. And it's an idea that I'm kind of, I need to talk with Lowery about it. So if he hears this, he can consider this my first entree. It's something I haven't talked to him about, but, there's a certain side to Camper that, we're working on this reissue series right now. So, the records have not been available from Telephone Freelance Live Victory, the first album, through Vampire Camp Meeting of, and they haven't really been available on vinyl since the 1980s. And so we are reissuing them with Cooking Vinyl. And for the CDs, we've decided when we're doing this, I think we're all, like, the Camper guys are all kind of like, no bonus cuts, none of that crap, just like the vinyl in its best form that we can reissue. And I've been able, 2 and 3 is just about done now. And I've been able to go and find original art, like somehow or another actually had the original art on like the Mylar layout grid paper of 2 and 3, and was able to scan that and recreate it in a kind of interesting way. But one thing that we did do for the CDs, we are doing bonus material. And so on Telephone Free, we had these demos that I had a cassette of that were recorded in David's mother's kitchen in 1983. And they're really beautiful. We're very young and very naive and kind of charming and oddly super fully formed for the time. Like, we've been a band for all of, in some cases, maybe 4 weeks. And the whole personality, even though the lineup hasn't coalesced, the personality is already there. It's kind of amazing. And another thing that happened was that for 2 and 3, David found our Sandman at the time when we were opening for REM had recorded us every night, and we found a recording of a song of a set from Lincoln, Nebraska, from that October 86 run with REM. And it sounds like Country Joe and the Fish meets Sonic Youth. And we have, like, our roadie is reading poetry, and we're playing in front of like 3,000 rabid REM fans. And, it's so kind of defiant and ugly. And there's a certain point, Stipe comes out and tells the crowd they got to shut up. And, we asked these guys out here on tour, you guys got to quiet down and listen to them. So listening to that, it's before we kind of tamed ourselves. The band tamed itself, because we were trying to be a successful band. And that's what bands do, especially in that time. We lost a certain side of what the band was that was very unruly and very hard to control. And that stuff is represented on this live recording. And part of what I'm thinking about doing is like, well, that may not be David's wheelhouse, but I think there's a few of us who might enjoy going and doing. So I'm contemplating throwing together a few Camper members and,
Would you revisit those songs, or would you do other stuff?
I'll revisit some of the material. I think probably focus on the instrumental stuff and just go crazy, and just like let it go. I think there's a small audience for it, and I think I love that music.
I'm there.
And there's a side of me that really, there are a lot of reasons why Camper, they're rational reasons. First of all, bands have lifespans. And I think, we had a pretty good one. We don't hate each other, but we don't always get along super well. I think there's a certain kind of residual tension between us that is just there. And I'm not particularly interested in, I don't think it needs to be solved. I don't think it's anything to really worry about. It's just kind of what our relationship is. But there's a lot of good that was in that band, and a lot of, I care about the music and I care about all the people in it. And I'm kind of loath to let it just not be. It's for some reason it doesn't feel right to me. So I feel like exploring it in kind of, it's not the Grateful Dead, it's more like Dead and Company kind of mode. Interesting. And I've got like this passel of great musicians who can help me do this. So let's put it this way. If the Civil War doesn't happen, it'll probably happen.
All right. We'll have to ask Dave about that.
Yeah.
David, Well, it's interesting to bookend, the first and last times I saw Camper. The first time was you guys opening for REM at UIC Pavilion in Chicago on that same tour. And I remember it might have been you. Someone kept saying, they were like baiting the audience saying, oh, you know, REO is going to be on. I know you're excited to see REO. And people were like, REM, not REO, what? You know, but it was, and I knew you guys at that point. I think I'd gotten 2 and 3. That was actually the first record I got, and then moved to Boston right afterwards. Saw you at this place, Night Stage, which was really small. I think right when the third record was coming out.
Yeah. Sure.
Saw you at the Paradise a few times, and then the last time I saw you was in September, where I actually flew out to DC, even though I'm in Chicago, because you guys are playing in Riot Fest here, and I'm like, I can't see a half-hour Camper set when you're actually doing full sets.
You know, that Riot Fest set, though, was really good.
Oh, I'm sure it was great. I wish I'd gone to both, but I think I was on the plane during your set there to see you at the 930 Club.
Yeah, that 930 Club was really good.
So really, that was really good, but the Riot Fest one was great. I saw the wrong one.
Yeah, no, I don't know. The Riot Fest one was it was short. It was very punk rock, you know? Like, we had 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Between Puddles the Clown and Sparks. You know, so we just really played like a bunch of super early stuff. We played like Club Med Sucks and Lassie and a few other things. And it was just, but it was really spirited. And, you know, and it's funny because, I mean, I've played a lot of festivals, especially in the last few years. You know, the Third Mind, we're doing like, you know, High Sierra and like some of these jam band festivals. And you kind of never know. You know, we'll play in the afternoon, might be a couple hundred people, might be a couple thousand. People are milling about and just kind of doing their thing. And I just kind of figured with Riot Fest, well, you know, you got like Blink 182 and, you know, all these bands that I've never heard of, you know, a lot of emo bands and the like, and, you know, a bunch of kids. I figure, well, the kids are going to go watch what the kids and, you know, we 60-year-olds are going to be over in the corner. When we played, it was packed.
Yeah, no, it should be.
And it was, you know, I mean, it's 20,000 people. I mean, pretty good at judging crowds, but, you know, it's like, it was a sea of people in front of the stage, and they were into it, and we were really spirited, and it was really fun. And, you know, I think we were all thinking that run, I mean, because that may have been the last Camper run. We don't know right now. Yeah,
I mean, David Lowery was putting on Facebook, like, hey, I don't want to, whatever, but this 930 Club show may be our last show, and these may be the last dates that we're doing.
I think in some ways he may be done, you know, and there's a few reasons behind that. It's not just the lifespan of the band and the interpersonal.
You're multi-continental also.
It's the cost, man. Like, things are expensive right now.
But you got Jonathan in Sweden, you got
Chris
in Australia, yeah.
And so, you know, and that's part of, you know, why I think about, you know, well, we just do a club thing and I'm not really concentrated on, like, you know, flying a band from Chicago to DC to Athens, Georgia. And, you know, it's just do a short run on the West Coast, and, you know, the financial burden becomes a little less, and the merch is good. I mean, because that's what happens at Third Mind. It's like, we don't really make money, but the merch does really well, and then we do make money. So, you know, it's just you got to, I mean, that's part of what we're dealing with right now. It's like the economics of doing this are not favorable right now. And the world is not being kind to musicians.
Some cool posters at that Camper show.
Well, you know, you gotta make cool posters. You know, you have to take it.
Is that you and your design chops?
For Camper, it wasn't. For Third Mind, I kind of in control of all the visual stuff. I get so inundated with work, I can't always control everything, and I think sometimes it's good to get a visual eye. Michael Wirtz has done a lot of the visual stuff for Camper, and he did that Camper stuff.
Yeah. And today they announced Record Store Day lineup for April, including the Record Store Day release of Camper Van Beethoven's Tusk.
Oh, I'm glad you brought this up. Now,
First time on vinyl.
This is an interesting thing because, you know, we're just talking about this solo record of mine. Like, Block Out the Sun is like the polar opposite kind of record of Tusk. Like, Tusk is... I hated it when we did it, to be honest. I don't like jokey things too much. And I just seem, you know... Like, I do like humor. I love humor in music. It's very important to me. You know, I like kind of subtle humor, black humor, things like this. And that record at the time just felt silly. And I'm not necessarily a fan of silly, but I had to listen to test pressings, and my opinion has changed to some degree. I think there's a lot of really brilliant stuff on that record, and it's so. I think Jonathan might actually be of the opinion that it's peak Camper Van Beethoven. I'm not sure. I actually think New Roman Times is peak Camper Van Beethoven for me.
Like of anything?
Of anything, actually, yes.
Really?
I think people, there's a certain set of our fan base, and I think I'm in agreement with them. I think New Roman Times is maybe one of the most brilliant things we ever did. But that's me, I mean, and it's no denigration. I mean, I love the kind of classic Our Beloved Key Lime Pie phase. Those are some of the records that I remain the most proud of. But as tastes change, I was surprised at how vibrant and spontaneous Tusk felt to me, and I think that's what I responded to. It's like I got
to go back to Tusk.
Yeah,
I remember when I got it, I was excited about it because I actually like the album Tusk because it's so weird. And then I'm like, oh, Camper Van Beethoven. And also, like, you had this sort of backstory that it was like hidden record from '87 when it was really just you guys getting your feet back in the water to play with each other again and then pretending it was old. But it was so noodly or jokey or something that it didn't get a lot of repeat listens from me.
And I'll caveat that, I mean, it's like Sandinista. It's like, I'm not going to defend the whole thing, but, it's pretty, there's a lot of interesting, spontaneous, loose stuff going on with it. That's why I like New Roman Times. And I also like New Roman Times topically. I think it's a fairly prescient album,
It's a song cycle. It's a rock opera almost.
It's a rock opera about the balkanization of America. So, I think it's very interesting. But then I also, I think it speaks to, a lot of this conversation we've been having is really rooted in the idea of controlling things. And, my whole kind of thesis has been, music's not about control. Music's really about spirit and freedom. And I think, in some ways, I think some of David's frustration with Camper is that it's not an easy group of people to control by any means. And I understand that. I think that's a completely rational response. It's pretty chaotic, but that's also what's really brilliant about it. And I think in retrospect, that's what's brilliant about Tusk is that it's the spirited piss take on this album. And not everything works, but some of it works really well. And some of it's actually really beautiful. And I think that is what's great about the kind of family of musicians I've worked with over this period of, my entire life, basically. Like, we've been resistant to being fit into a box. I don't want to be, Dave Allman is like my brother. I love him dearly, but I don't want that controlled an image or career. That's not me. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in being able to do any number of things and do them well, not do them as a dilettante, but like do them well. And I feel like I've been able to do that. I can be a really effective songwriter. I'm really good. I can do a great acoustic show. I'm really good with, like, as a storyteller. I can do that songwriter thing and I really enjoy it. And it's definitely a big part of what I do, but I play the bass very well, and I really like playing bass with people, and I like collaborating musically, and I like being able to do, like Michael Jerome is a good example of somebody to me he's fully formed as a musician. He's a drummer. He can play jazz. He can play rock. He can improvise. He can play a pop song. He does all of it. And I just, that's where it's at for me.
He plays the song. He doesn't play the drums. Song. He plays the song. And I've always been knocked out by that with him and with you. I mean, it's like, when people talk about favorite bassists, I would always bring you up. And then when I saw Michael Jerome first, I'm like, oh my God, it's one of the best drummers. And when you guys started playing together, I'm like, well, that's like the dream rhythm section from as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have been super spoiled with drummers, just to start my career with Chris Peterson. I mean, Chris Peterson's not a joke as a drummer.
Oh no, he's great.
Over the years, I've worked.
Not on the first record though, right?
He's not on the first record. That's Anthony Guess, who's also, little wobblier, but still pretty potent. but I've worked with a lot of great drummers and some, pretty notable studio names over the course of doing this. And Jerome is just the most musical, and he's also just a superlative human being. But it's interesting to have, just on the strict kind of bass and drums level, like I can read that guy like a book, and I only played with him for like 5 years. I mean, I know, like, I don't know what the fill's necessarily going to be because it's with him, it's different every time, but I know more or less where he's going to go and vice versa. And so there's this just great fun. Like when the Third Mind gets together, one of the funnest things is when Dave Sowing is playing with Emmy and Michael and myself, just as a rhythm section, and just, Emmy will throw a riff and Michael start playing off of it and then trying to play off them. And then I'll start doing something and Michael will be playing off me, and just that interchange. And that's where we're at. It's the
telepathy of the Third Mind.
Yeah. It's it's what, like the Rolling Stones, there was always something that was very interesting to me about the Stones, and that, if you do the deep dive and you're listening to, rough takes, you're listening to some bootleg and they're playing like Tumbling Dice, like the first 10 takes are like, this is the worst band in the world. These guys are just suck. And then like take 11 happens. It's like, this is the best band that ever existed. And it's just that magic. And, it took a long time for me to get there, but I last 5-6 years is just kind of I've been working with this level of competence with people that's just really been great, and it's also, I think the other thing too is having kind of a community. All the musicians I work with do, Emmy plays with a bunch of people, Willie Aaron plays with a bunch of people, Dave does, we all do a lot of different stuff, and that's kind of what Jonathan and Greg, the Camper guys, all like, I like being around people who don't get stuck in one basket.
Yeah,
like
you've done.
Yeah, being in U2, like that would have killed me. Probably literally killed me. It's just not an option. And so yeah, you don't have, because media wants like this kind of, to manifest the mega stardom. They want this kind of controlled thing that they can kind of twist and try and make contemporary. And that's not what I am. I'm a musician.
Well, I hope the world allows you and all of us to continue being creative well into the future.
Yeah, I do as well.
And I hope like that the urgency, I hope the urgency to create stays there, but the ability to do it for a while also stays there. So how's that for a hope?
There's really good stuff. I mean, the solo stuff that I did with the Third Mind backing up is great, and it's basically done. And, hopefully we can find a good channel to release that. The Ian Matthews thing, I think, certainly has a home now, and I'm really looking forward to getting that done. And I think we're going to do Ian really well. I think Ian turns 80 in June, and I think he deserves, this record. I think we're going to deliver something that is unexpected.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to hearing that. Yeah. I saw that on your website, and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, it's somewhere between, some of the songs are like almost zombie-like, like as in the zombies, not Fela Kuti zombie. And so it's almost like kind of early David Crosby, and I just, knowing us as players, it will sound fresh and vibrant, and I think it's going to be a really good thing.
How did he react to the music you sent back?
He's been thrilled. It's been really great. And, and the fun thing is it's not just Ian and I writing, it's Ian writing with most of us in the band. And everybody's kind of taking a piece of what he's thrown out and sitting over the corner and doing their thing. So Willie Aaron wrote a song that's, if we're 1971, we'd have a #1 hit in our hands, but it's 2026, so who knows?
Yeah, people will buy records from 1971, but they just have to be remastered really well. So
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on the plate, and we definitely, I think, the Third Mind will be doing Hardly Strictly Bluegrass in the fall, and probably a little bit more run, and then we'll see. I think this Camper Meets Dead and Company idea hopefully I'll manifest that this year.
Yeah, keep us posted on that.
Yeah, it's, I'm just trying to find the window when to pull the trigger on it.
There you go. Well, we'll put it out there in the universe and when this.
Yeah, exactly. I think
out.
part of doing interviews like this for me too is always just kind of like statement of intent,
That's good.
Because then things start happening.
All right. Well, wonderful as always to talk to you, Victor. I hope to see you and hear you again soon on this coast or your coast. So
yeah,
or some other coast.
Yeah. Watch out for the ice agents.
That's all for episode 212 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Victor Krummenacher for talking with us again and sharing so many insights into his creative life and beyond. If you want to hear more from him, go back to Caropop episode 19 from February 2022, where he relates his history with and without Camper Van Beethoven. Go to victorkrummenacher.com to get his latest news, to request house concerts, and to order physical copies of Block Out the Sun and other works. You also can buy the new album on Krummenacher's Bandcamp page. TheThirdMind.net offers information about that band and its upcoming West Coast tour. It begins March 12th in Eugene, Oregon, and winds up March 24th in Solana Beach, California. We'll be keeping an ear out for the upcoming collaborative album between Most of the Third Mind and former Fairport Convention singer Ian Matthews as well. And on Record Store Day, April 18th, look for Cooking Vinyl's 2-LP colored vinyl set of Camper Van Beethoven's version of Fleetwood Mac's Tusk. Caropop is produced by Chris Wake, who enjoys doing this over and over. Thanks to all who support Caropop, including Courtney Simeone. If you'd like to throw something into the Caropop kitty, we'd be much appreciative, and I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Please go to caropop.com. Thanks so much for listening and being here. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow Caropop on the so-called socials at Caropopcast. You can follow me as well at Mark Caro, at MarkCaro. Please share this episode, subscribe here and on YouTube, tell your friends, and return next week for another Caropop conversation. Thanks.